What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and this is part 2 of my realistic Pokemon team. For those that are wondering where part 1 is, it's up on my channel right now, so I suggest you see that. And honestly, it really does say a lot. But again, just to mention, if you're wondering, why don't I have like 6 Pokemon I chose? Why does it have to be split up into 2 parts? Well, it just so happens to be a lot of Pokemon that I want for my realistic Pokemon team. And honestly, even with that, there still might be some more Pokemon I'd want to add to my team. So, maybe a second half to this? Who knows? Fingers crossed. Alright. Going back to... With that being said, let's just get back into it. And honestly, for those that already don't know, you already know I love grass-type Pokemon. I mean, Rillaboom is it was the previous grass-type Pokemon I've had on my team. However, another Pokemon I'd have on my team is Sawsbuck. Alright, now if you already hadn't guessed, Generation 5 is personally my favorite generation. Univa's my favorite region. I like the black and white anime. And in fairness, I love a lot of Univa Pokemon. So, however, that being said, if I had if Pokemon were real, I would basically choose Sawsbuck because, honestly, the area where I live at, there are a lot of deer. I mean, granted, this kind of makes sense with any state in the Northeast. I mean, keep in mind, I live in New Jersey, which more often than not has been linked with New York in terms of certain aspects. But even with that, honestly, the area where I live at, there have been points where I've actually seen deer showing up. And I've tended to notice that more often than not. I mean, heck, I've seen a few deer basically cross my backyard more like once or twice. So, yeah, it kind of makes sense here. But even with, I mean, there's even a point where where nearby, I actually saw like a dead deer on the side of the road. And basically, when my mom noticed it, she actually ended up saying, "Poor Bambi." I was like, okay. But surprisingly enough, it's kind of an interesting aspect that if you're around my neck of the woods, you will see, there's a good chance you will end up seeing a deer at some point. Speaking of animals that I more or less see every day, squirrels. Yeah, more often than not, in the area where I live, more often than not, when I look outside of the patio window leading to the balcony, there is a good chance that almost every day, like every morning, I will see a couple of squirrels roaming about. Granted, I didn't see them like today, but they're out there. And more often than not, it's kind of interesting to see a couple of... More often than not, I can honestly mention how many times I've looked out the window early in the morning, mostly while I'm drinking my coffee or eating my breakfast, and I've seen a squirrel just scrabbling around out there. And let's be real, I am a late riser, so yeah, more often than not, I'll wake up around 10, 11 in the morning. noon at the latest. So, yeah, they would be out there. So, kind of makes sense that I would essentially have a Pachirisu as a part of my realistic Pokemon team to kind of have my own Squirtle just running around making this team hectic. Speaking of being a late riser, yeah, it's for that same reason that I have a Torchic and I guess I'd have a Torchic and a Blaziken on my team. And yeah, I know a lot of people are gonna say, wait, why not Dodrio? Don't they normally act like roosters in the anime? And yeah, that's kind of true, but naturally when it comes down to it, whenever anyone thinks about like natural alarm clocks, roosters kind of come to mind. And since Blaziken is the only Pokemon that we know of that's based on an actual rooster, well, basically a Shamo Shamo chicken, yeah, kind of makes sense that I would have a Blaziken out there that would more or less act as kind of my alarm clock. Like, kind of crowing early in the morning. Granted, I'd be hearing, like, Blaziken! Which, yeah. More or less, it would be an outside chicken, but since, yeah, I have a lot of stuff that I don't want it to demolish with its flaming kicks, so that's why. Also, again, Torchic just seems like an adorable little Pokemon that I would more or less easily take care of as well. I mean, it's a baby chick. Like a baby chicken. Just seeing it running around just really really brighten my day. Also, it's pretty warm for him to hug, so I basically have it as kind of a shoulder chicken. Please someone send me a video about that, please. I would really love to see that. Sorry. Anyway, speaking of fiery birds, I'd also have a Talonflame on my team. Granted, we don't have a lot of birds of prey around where I live at. I mean, at least once I saw like an owl or a hawk in the tree outside my window in my backyard. But even with that, we've never really had that many birds of prey. So, but I actually remember a story something my dad told me about a hawk actually flying, like a red-tailed hawk actually flying into the window, into the patio door. Like, just ended up flying into it and, like, bah! And honestly, I didn't actually see it, but I still kind of remember it. So, I guess maybe for that reference, I guess I'd say I'd have a Talonflame. Honestly, I have not seen that hawk do that, so I don't know, but I have Talonflame nonetheless. That being said, keeping up with the fire types, I'd also have a Scovillain on my team. Alright, if you hadn't already guessed, like many other people, I actually wanted a grass and fire type, which I have a few ideas for a grass and fire type. I mean, heck, I created a Jack-o'-lantern Pokemon called Jackoferno. So, honestly, you can understand how excited I was to see Capsicid and Scovillain in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, since they're basically chili pepper Pokemon. That being said, yeah, I'm choosing Scovillain with the fact over the fact that I love spicy foods. I mean, I haven't had it since, but I had spicy food since then. But more often than not, I do like a lot of spicy food, so I guess this kind of makes sense to have Scovillain around, basically as kind of a reference to my love of spice. That being said, there are a lot of Pokemon that I would have that's kind of interesting based on my own interests. But one pair of Pokemon that I would have on my team just so happens to be Minccino and Kinkino. Yeah. Granted, if you hadn't already guessed, I tend not to keep my room clean. I still have to sweep up around here since there are a lot of dust. But even with that, honestly, I guess I'd have both Minccino and Cinccino on my team, more or less just to help me out with the cleaning, since both Pokemon are more or less very fastidious and will spend their time sweeping things with their tail and cleaning things with their tails. So, kinda makes sense to have them as my own personal cleaning crew. Now, we're getting into the more nitty gritty and niche aspects of my life. And growing up in school, I kind of was a somewhat A student, but some of my best subjects were English, history, and science. So it kind of makes sense some Pokemon would kind of reference those interests. And honestly, one of the Pokemon that I would have on my realistic Pokemon team would be Avalugg, which is interesting since it's just a walking iceberg or a walking ice flow, but it's largely based on Project Habakkuk, something I didn't actually know about until I saw it on the History Channel. And honestly, when it comes down to it, seeing how I've watched a lot of History Channel and Travel Channel, yeah, I kind of remember that. And for that same sort of scientific aspect, I also have the Pokemon Metagross as a part of my realistic Pokemon team, since as a nerd, I like anything involving technology, like computers, the internet, and even video games. So, having a walking supercomputer on my team would be pretty cool when you think about it. This just leaves us with the final two Pokemon. And honestly, they're those that I really couldn't find anywhere else. But both kind of make the most sense. And honestly, first things first, I love penguins. I mean, penguins, alongside elephants, penguins are one of my favorite animals. However, I'm not gonna have Donphan or Great Tusk, Iron Shreds, or Copperajah on my team, so I decided to go with a penguin Pokemon. And honestly, Piplup kind of fits the bill as a part of my realistic Pokemon team, since it's just an adorable little penguin. Don't get me wrong, Empoleon's pretty cool, but I kind of prefer Piplup. Mostly because it's a Diamond and Pearl anime. And the final one just so happened, and the final Pokemon on my realistic Pokemon team is Salamence. Honestly, I kinda prefer Salamence over Dragonite and Garchomp as my favorite pseudo-legendary. Plus the fact that it's based on a European dragon, and the fact that I love a lot of things involving a high fantasy world like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Fire Emblem, and Legend of Zelda, all of which have dragons, yeah, it kind of scratches my dragon itch to have, like, Salamence on my realistic team, so there's that. And those are my that is my realistic Pokemon team. Like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.